sort of framing of I suppose that the journey to enlightenment. I try to avoid using that word often, but a lot of the times we think it's going to be some sort of radical change in the content of our lives, and we get this idea that somehow we're going to look so different and we're going to feel so different, but it's really fundamentally a change in our context. It's a fundamentally different context, and it's instead of only knowing the self-referential loop, we discover something that's deeper. We discover what Maslow called the peak experience. And at first it might be just these little jaunts or accidental voyages into that place, but if we persist and keep going, then our trips there become much more prolonged, and they start to seep into and bleed into the rest of our lives, until at one point we wake up and we realize we're no longer the little waves struggling against the world. We have a sense of being this vast ocean that just happens to be living through this beautiful unique 7 planets in Virgo wave. So and that's the real trick, and that takes a lot of pressure off, because we really need not have to try to change our configuration all that much. Rather, we're just teaching ourselves how to relax into something that's already there, that's below the tip of our tongue, that's already always been there. This strata of consciousness that's just sitting and waiting quietly underneath all the noise at the surface, and touching that.
Hello and welcome to the Inner Sanctum with special guest teacher Ishtar Howell, who's joining us. Hello, Ishtar.
Hello, Karen.
Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Portugal. Ishtar is in Portugal. What took you to Portugal?
The plane. No, yeah, I had to give you a Beatles answer. Turn left at Greenland. My wife's from Portugal. She was born and raised here, and we met in the United States, and we were living there for many years, and then she was living in Japan, and then I was living in Japan with her, and before that we were in Canada. So we've kind of been nomads in a certain sense, and it just seemed like the right time to come back to Portugal and go over to Europe. But I think it's proven a very good situation, because we've been sort of in a little farmhouse out in the remote countryside for all of these pandemic times, which is a pretty good place to be.
Oh, beautiful. So you're not on the coast, you're a bit inland.
Yeah, we're inland, where it's really good to grow melons and peppers and tomatoes and all those wonderful hot weather plants that gobble up the sunshine.
Oh, I'm envious. You're having the country life. I'm having the city life. You're having the country life. Let me just read a little bit of your bio for people that don't know you. Ishtar-born Thomas Howell works as a meditation teacher and Ishaya monk, and we said this before, gardener, writer, and intuitive astrologer. At 13, you were in a car accident that took your mother's life and initiated an NDE, which brought about a profound experience of Samadhi, which you experienced along with an intense process of grieving. At 17, you began a regime of meditation practice and aesthetic principles that included waking to cold showers at 3 a.m. fasting and 6-hour daily meditation practice. Yeah, you put yourself through the paces, darling. You really did. We discussed this on the show last time. Just tell us your process. Do you think that for people that are on a spiritual path, that want to know who they are more fully, all those sort of aesthetic practices, and are they necessary, or can we be the householder, as they called it in the book? Autobiography of a yogi.
They're absolutely unnecessary, certainly to the extent that I was doing them. That said, I did have an itch, I think, an aesthetic itch that really wanted to be scratched. So in my particular case, I think it was probably a good period for me to kind of experience and burn off, so that I could do something more healthy and moderated and really easier. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be so crazy and difficult. So yes, the householder path is, I think the way to go for 90, 95, 97% of us on the planet right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that no longer is spiritual exploration for someone that wants to be the guru. It needs to be everybody, really, at this point. And, at this point in our human evolution, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, we're all kind of like seeds that are just waiting to unfold. And I don't necessarily know that the destiny for every single one of us is going in this particular life is going to be to unfold all of our petals, but I do think that we can unfold quite a few of them. And yeah, I think that is much more universally true.
Mm. So, and I won't read all your bio, but in 2008, you left monastic life and took on an extended break from meditation teaching. The years outside your cloistered environment and ashram were often challenging, but ultimately led to more deeply anchored presence. And since 2014, you've been teaching ascension meditation and working as a spiritual guide, giving people reliable practices which cultivate awareness and assisting people in relaxing into presence. Since 2015, you've been working as an intuitive astrologer as well, primary focus on helping people align more completely with their soul's purpose. We might get into that question that Yonette answered us in the chat room this morning.
It was just a moment of doubting myself and then saying, well, no, I'm just being humble. I'm not really doubting myself. I'm just being humble. I'm just being, not braggadocious. I'm just, it's one of those conundrums, I think, self-doubt and what does it mean to be humble? What does it mean to be humble when we have this much power? What does it mean to be humble when we're extraordinary beings, right? Here on the planet to do amazing things. What does it mean to be humble in the space of all of this enormous access to power, right? Access to source. And then so how do you be humble in all of that? Because we're supposed to be, this amazing being of light. And then how do you discern humility from that?
Right. I think one of the most beautiful things, which is to be radically honest. And even if that includes things that we might think are a bit I don't know, reprehensible slightly or a little bit off, but there's a beauty in being vulnerable like that, and I think that if we're able to be that open and that vulnerable, that out there, that has a tendency of moving us into real humility, but another thing is that, so when I was coming up as a teenager, I was reading all these spiritual books, and often they would go through these lists of prerequisites that they would say you need to have this quality and that quality and that quality and etc. to even approach enlightenment, whatever the hell that was being billed as. And I would usually go through and I would say, yeah, I don't have that. Probably not much of a chance of developing that here. So I guess I'm kind of out of luck, on this whole thing. But what I found is that it was far more efficient and easy to not even try to have those virtues, because I was a crazy moon in Virgo, virtue obsessed person. I wanted to be so good and pure and all these other things, and yet all of those things kind of came along for the ride when I just started to rest into that profound peace that we all know inside. When I started to meditate, and the meditation would bring me to presence, and out of that presence, whatever virtues are trying to naturally kind of unfold in this particular body mind just kind of came in the world. You remind me of a lot of my fire sign Leo and Aries and Sagittarius friends who they just drop the masks and they're just straight up about that. And even if they're a little bit off, because they're being honest and because they're just being straightforward with it, they tend to evolve very quickly. They tend to have an easier time letting go of things and seeing their own bullshit. It's kind of like when I was in musical theater, the theater director would say it's much better to sing out, because then at least you have a better chance of knowing when you're off key. And I think,
Yeah.
there's some wisdom in that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I want to add my 2 cents as normal. I think that knowing that we are this love, light, infinite potential, creative potential, we are this amazing, being. I think the humility in all of this comes when we know everybody else is too. It's like everybody, the murderer, like everybody, the one that you think did the most heinous thing, they are that same source. They are connected to that same source. And so humility comes from knowing who you are as a connection or an extension of that brilliance, but realizing everybody is too. What do you say about that, Ishtar?
No, I mean, that's absolutely the case. One of the experiences of especially the last 3 years for me has been really the sense of being in many bodies at once, being in many people at once, just naturally feeling into everybody, and that includes the whole spectrum, and a sense of being in the thief and being in the murderer, being in the murdered, and
yeah,
there's
experiencing all of it. I had a humility moment. I was talking to my daughter on the phone last night. Oh, bless her soul. She's just, children are your greatest teachers, right? I don't know. Like she's coming into her own as a teacher, which I was told years ago when she was a baby, through some medium and psychic, like she'll be a teacher like you, but she'll do it very differently to you. And I just kept thinking, wow, I wonder how that's going to look, how that's going to play out. Because we're all teachers and we're all doing it so differently. Some are singing, some are talking, some are dancing, we're all sort of doing it differently. And she was not up for some of the stuff I was telling her about what's happening now. Like she's drunk the Kool-Aid, she's listening to the mainstream narrative, and she's swallowed it hook, line and sinker. And I think humility is, for me in that moment, was not trying to make her wrong about that, and just letting her discover it for herself without, forcing my opinions on her. And so as soon as she started talking about it, I just zipped it and then changed the subject and just like, if she needs to find out, she'll find out. And I think that's humility of, staying in your truth and knowing that what you perceive or know or experience is true, and letting other people have a different opinion to you and make you wrong without feeling like you're wrong. Self-doubt is like, oh, maybe I am wrong. Maybe I can't trust my intuition. That's doubt. But humility is like, no, this feels right. This feels like my truth. And letting somebody make you wrong, and you go, yeah, okay, I'm wrong. If that's what you want to believe, I'm wrong.
There's a lot of grace in that. I mean, I don't know, our opinions that we might hold, they tend to be revised all the time if we're honest. Mm-hmm. And so there really is very little point on being on too much of a high horse, even if we maybe rightfully get to be on the high horse, if we're the one to discover the truth of something, even there,
So,
and
that's beautiful. Thanks, Kristen. I know. Look, being honest in these times, we're at extraordinary times. It's not just personal; it's global. Like being honest about who you are and what you believe, and letting people balk at that and say, "Oh, that is absolute crap." I don't know. Maybe Ishtar, when you went through your NDE, your experience of presence, trying to describe what you experienced to someone that has no idea about that would have been the same thing. I mean, how do you, I guess that's why you threw yourself into monastic life, trying to figure it all out. Like you had an experience and now you want to figure out exactly what that is and find words to tell people.
Well, yeah, I'm more than that. There's kind of a deeper sort of place. We can talk about what the character thinks. These are my opinions, and I'm being very honest and forthright about this. But there's you know, the kind of the deeper, maybe capital T truth or something is finding out who you are beyond the mask, beyond who you think you are, beyond the little person, the little commentator who sits a couple inches behind the forehead or wherever. And you know, when we touch it, that's what presence is, that silence that's back there. And when we touch into that, it's as almost as if it really doesn't matter anymore. You know, whether anybody understands you or agrees with you or disagrees with you, there's a place in which it just doesn't really, you know, matter all that much. And there's that's the timeless and that's the eternal part of ourselves. And when we come into contact with that, it's like a homecoming. You know, that's the homecoming. I think that's the point of being here in a body, at least partially, is you know, knowing the diamond, knowing the diamond that's in our back pocket. You know, because our little identities, that was the most profound thing of the NDE, was that I was cruising along this life with this little identity, and, you know, the plans of mice and men, and, you know, trying to be a good person or trying to do this or that or live up to expectations, learning how to wear masks and manipulate in middle school so that people would like me or that parents would like me, you know, building that shadow self by hiding all the things that I thought that people didn't want to see, you know, deep away. And the NDE just crushed that. It just obliterated it. And there was so much lightness. I had no idea how heavy all of that was, how heavy it is to have to maintain this kind of small identity structure, because of course I was almost totally immersed in it, because I barely could see out of that tiny little prison. And that's why, you know, spiritual teachers say, you know, human life, you know, basically is like clutching with all your might at a dime when you have a diamond in your back pocket. You know, because the dime is all the dilemmas of the ego and all of that sort of stuff. And so, you know, a lot of these problems, it's not like we necessarily solve them from the level that they're created. In fact, they might well continue on. You can have sort of, you know, marked disagreement with people on a certain level, and you know, be very honest about it. And maybe have some vitriol going back and forth and all of that. But if we know this timeless and eternal place, if we know who we are beyond that mask, then I think that smooths out a lot of rough edges. And
look, absolutely. And I think that, you know, like what Krista was talking about, how do you present that to your children or your friends or who are well and truly rooted in I am this ego personality mind body complex, and they've never entertained being anything else as you had before you had your NDE. You know, what I see happening in the world is, just like you and many of the people I've had on the show and myself, it took great trauma to knock me out of that ego identity. And I think that that's what's happening in the world. You know, we're going through some great trauma for many people, whether it's financial trauma or lockdown trauma or, you know, illness trauma or whatever trauma. We're going through some heavy stuff, and it's making people question themselves and who am I? And it's a shame that that's what it takes to sort of, I don't know, for you, like you've had this car accident and your mother dies and you've had this experience with presence, like you were going through some heavy stuff as well. And for Kristen, especially her children going through the loss of dad. But this great trauma that we go through is all for good reason.
And I think, Kristen, I think how you were with your kids is beautiful. You know, I lost my mother and retained my father, but I would have enjoyed it if my father was to me as you were to your children. And, you know, so I just wanted to say I really appreciate that. First of all, I think that's a really good attitude, not to be chasing the spiritual awakening word or the enlightenment word or any kind of projections that we have about that. Of course, as human beings with the minds that we have, we're all quite naughty about creating projections and chasing them in you know, gross and subtle ways, but it's you know, those are actually really ill-defined words often, and it's nice to be without them, and it's nice to be just very real and very present, you know, with direct experience, and kind of stay grounded in that way as a general. All those experiences that you were listing out at the beginning, those are pretty damn common to people who are, you know, having their subtle channels opening up. And while I think it's really good to also be grounded about that sort of thing, you know, not getting so hung up on, does this mean this, is this, because that actually has a tendency of often, you know, you sort of pulling yourself out of the place from which a lot of these things, you know, kind of unfold from. But that tingling around the head, tingling around the crown, often a pressure right here, in that sort of area, that's kind of a sign that, you know, the tubes are coming open. I try not to be like, you know, too crass or vulgar about thinking about the process of waking up, but I do kind of think of us as kind of tubes, you know, that enlightenment's kind of a plumbing issue, and that our problem is just that we've just got way too gunked up, and we've put these straitjackets around our nervous systems, and, you know, and we can't function properly. And meditation is a means of opening that channel again, so that the water of life is flowing in the way that it intends to. When it does that, yeah, we get, you know, the water's trying to push out there, so to speak. The water's trying to push up here. That ear ringing, I'm sure you know, read all of this already and have a clue, so you don't need me saying anything here. But yeah, that ear ringing is so typically not tinnitus. It does tend to be, you know, some kind of perception of the ohm. You know, that's sometimes it's that high-pitched sound, and sometimes it's also that very low bass kind of tone that's almost out of the range of sound itself, and until it becomes the most subtle form of ohm in which we are experiencing it, just at that borderland between form and formless, which is what the ohm is a vehicle for anyways, but that's a digression. Now I've covered your back and your front right there. We've got the bookend, so you have to remember what's on the inside of the sushi roll. You think you were asking about how things are right now versus how things maybe were in the beginning, and or years ago. And sometimes I'm loath to answer this, because one, we're all so, I wouldn't want anybody to compare themselves to me in any way, in a certain sense, or use any of the things that I say as some kind of projection for their own growth, because yeah, all those plans of mice and men we have to throw out the window in the end, and we all kind of are unfold in different ways. But with that long caveat put out there, there is a sense in which at one point meditation just kind of continued on its own with my eyes open, in the extent that it was happening with the eyes closed. And I still am a regular meditator, and when I close my eyes, I basically fall back into this this very delicious presence. My main practice for the last 18 years has been a mantra practice, and in the beginning, what it was like for me was, I would do the thing, and I would do it, no matter how I was feeling, whether I was feeling great or feeling shitty, I wasn't paying attention to any of that, and I would just do it dutifully, and at a certain point, I would be experiencing that wonderful silence that was one of the hallmarks of the NDE, that wonderful sense of non-locality and clarity and profound rest, and all these other words we can throw at this sort of wordless dimension of experience. And then I would come out and be in everyday life and get lost in my stresses and get lost in my bullshit that I was still carrying around. And I've just rinse and repeat, and did this, just kept going until a lot of the bullshit wasn't there anymore, until I would find that, hey, didn't I used to react to that? Why aren't I reacting to that right now? I always react to that and make a fool of myself. And those just kind of fell away naturally. And then at some point, I just kind of realized that there was, there was this bliss and this joy that seemed to be, pretty much happening all the time. And so that's kind of how things are. There's definitely still going deeper and letting go even more. It's just in a different place than when I was 18, and more the seeker, right? And grounding, doing things to ground is terribly helpful, and doing things that your body needs. And I was a real space cadet. That was my reputation at the ashram, especially my first couple years. And so it was like every now and then they were like, get that kid a burger, or get him some more hematite rings, or get him some lead, tie some lead to his shoes or something like that. Anything. Think of your feet. I know I don't get this. That's that sort of extreme sense from you, but it's important to do that.
That kid a burger. That's hilarious.
Yes, those were the exact words. Get Ishtar a burger before he fucking breaks something. Or, that's...
that documentary I've been spruiking on Facebook, Grounding, Earthing is a brilliant document, free on YouTube, about, just being connected to the earth. It just has all the science. It's like why you want to put your feet on the earth. Like we can talk esoterically about grounding and not being so up there, in our head, flying around the cosmos with the aliens or whatever, and being more grounded on earth. And but it's a brilliant documentary about just the physiological effects of just having our feet on the earth. It's like it's all stuff we know, but when you see the science like that, you go, oh wow. And how it alleviates pain and all the good things. Earthing, grounding, earthing.
I just want to piggyback on that before going to another subject.
Sure.
But
yeah.
I have to say I felt the most grounded the less I feared things.
Mm-hmm.
And the more the sort of the fears in my heart, fell away, which mainly in my case, in my biography, most of my conditioning came when I started to meet lots of other children at school, and I was pretty much put off by how cruel people were to each other, even at such a young age, and that kind of basically set me out of my body. People would say, "You're out of your body." I say, "What do you mean? I'm in my body. Look, I'm moving my hands. What are you talking about?" I didn't exactly know what they were meaning by those words, but I was I was checked out, and so as those bits of conditioning, as those kind of, as that sense that I needed to defend myself fell away, then all of a sudden I didn't have 10 thumbs anymore. And then all these wonderful sort of tactile and practical abilities just kind of manifested automatically. And I found myself able to fix things, to fix machines, or to build things, or to do things with my hands. And it was, the ultimate grounding, in the end, didn't really come from the burgers that people they were feeding me, but it came from just feeling at home, just feeling safe, and that safety came from that sense of the eternal, because the more we rest in the eternal, the more we find that sort of timeless space inside us, the more we're kind of bathed in it, and it's like all those wounded inner children that we carry around with us. And we really kind of do. All those bits of stunted development that we protect, well, when they come into contact with that presence, with the Tao, with Samadhi, with that sort of eternal peace space, then it's like they feel safe enough to not defend themselves anymore. And so I just wanted to add that.
That is so true about fear, like you just leave your body. Fear, or being overwhelmed, or overwhelmed, fear, like anything. It's just like, I can't cope with what's going on. Let me just sort of get out of here. And you're not really present. I must have been doing that a lot lately. I tell you what, I've had so many accidents and fell over. I took a 4 days ago. I slipped over and smashed my body up again. I must not be grounded enough, I think, or it might be all the retrograde planets, Ishtar. I don't know. Like, we can't blame the planets. We have to be in our bodies, right?
Yeah, when I was in that kitchen as a young 18-year-old, teen monk, God, the accidents I would cause, all the pans in the kitchen falling down on the ground, making such a clatter, and so embarrassing. But they were all there to push me into being present. It was basically me being my own poltergeist, trying to kick myself in the ass to the fact that I was being run by these, like these internal conditioning, these orphaned, versions of me that were locked up, trying to get out of the shadow and say, please let me come back into the self.
Yeah. Lionsgate. Yeah. What's your perspective on the Lionsgate, Ishtar?
I'm actually not that deep into. I'm actually not that deep into it because I'm like a Saturnian astrologer, which means that I can sort of be very, very slow to adopt all sorts of the new things, and I'm sketchy about numerology too in general, and weaving that into astrology. Now, I do think there's something about Leo, Egypt, the part of the sky that Leo is passing through. About this time of year. So in as much as there's that, I think there's a generalized Lionsgate, but it ain't just 8/8 or something. I mean, for God's sakes, we haven't had this calendar, for the whole history of astrology. It's moved around quite a bit, so the numbers have been different, and it's kind of an arbitrary thing. But there's this bright leonine energy in these degrees of Leo. If somebody's into what are called the Sabian symbols, it's a part of astrology. Obviously very speculative, but God, so it's all of astrology, that in which they look at each specific degree of any given sign. Every sign has 30 degrees, and this part of Leo, there's that kind of primordial roar that's coming through. And to me, from what I've read on different people write on the Lionsgate, I think that's the core thing that's trying to bubble up underneath. And another thing about Leo that I would want to talk about in general, that often goes overlooked in astrology books, is that I think the core of the sign, the core lessons of the sign, are actually dealing with vulnerability. Often the shadow side of Leo, everybody knows that, vanity. That's one of them. But when I explain Leo to people, especially Leos, I say, listen, all fire signs are dealing with tests of courage. Leo's test of courage is essentially the test of courage of the solo performer. And having done that a lot myself, when you're in the choir, you can hide your sound, in a wall of sound, and you don't have to be afraid about being singled out for your off notes. When you're the soloist, you don't have that luxury. When you come to certain notes that you're singing, unless you're like Freddie Mercury or somebody like that, has probably got it covered. But when you come to certain notes that you're singing, you know that if you don't go all into this note, you're going to flub it, right? And you're going to flub it in front of 400 people. And so as a Leo, that's Leo's chords. You face this, okay, do I remain in control to try to save my hide, which probably ends up in you flubbing your note, or do I let go of control and be completely vulnerable and lean completely into the sound that's trying to come out of me, that's trying to flow through me? That's the dilemma of Leo. And when they do that, then that's pure Leo. Then that's a Leo that has transcended the ego, at least for that moment. And that's kind of the energy I feel at this time of Leo, especially this kind of mid Leo period is this: are you ready to roar to such an extent that the roar itself takes your ego through the eye of the needle and transforms you and transmutes you into basically the song of God that you were intended to be in the first place, instead of this caricature of a person who's just getting in the way the whole damn time anyways. And so that might not be what we're asking about. That I know that's way out of context of how most people talk about the Lion's Gate, but that's kind of what I feel at this time of Leo especially.
We are
That's the core of it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when we talk about sort of the corresponding house, and in astrology, I don't like to get signs and houses sort of too conflated. That's kind of a tendency, and I don't think it's good. But still, when we think of the fifth house, which is the house associated with Leo, the house associated with the sun as well, it's the house of play. It's the house of children. The deepest level of that is becoming the innocent again. essentially, what is the divinity of the child? The divinity of the child is that they've come from the unbound realms, as Wordsworth said, trailing clouds of glory do we come. And that's the core of Leo. Can you get out of your way and let yourself be consumed by these, this trail of clouds of glory? Yeah.
Absolutely, that was beautifully explained. Okay, so I've just heard you say, stay in the present and don't think too much about the past or the future. And I'm going to ask you a future question. So, as an astrologer, what do you, what are the, I'm not an astrologer, so I don't look too much into astrology and go down that route, but I'm always fascinated when people do. What's it saying about this time of, as we've called it, as Jeanette called it, the shift, or the reset? What's astrology saying about what we're going through globally?
We're kind of going through a rock and a hard place, astrologically speaking. Anytime actually there are significant Pluto-Saturn aspects, whether it's a conjunction or an opposition, these are the real bracing ones you want to pay attention. There's this sense of being squeezed. There's a sense of Pluto and Saturn in a sense are both diggers in their own ways. Saturn is a kinder teacher than Pluto. Pluto is a bloody typhoon that's coming through. Pluto is death with the Grim Reaper stuff. And so there is this excavation of the basement of the shadow stuff, and it's this year it's really been brought up, and it's up to us what we want to do with that. There are different reactions when this happens. It's like the skeletons, in all of these happening in Capricorn, and there's this sense of systems of power, and what is their basis? What are they really built on? Is it savory, or is it a bunch of genocide, slavery, and bullshit? And that's coming up into the consciousness again, in a much larger way than it has before. And so what do people do with that? Now there's where, I guess supposed individual choice comes. Do we double back against it and say like, no, not me, not this, no, what, or do we say like, yeah, okay, you know what? I've looked at the books, I've looked at the so-called culture and and it is based on a bunch of bullshit. And how about we change some of that? So these are just different ways. I'm not gonna put my finger on what's one thing being truer or the other. You probably can kind of guess from my tone, but I'm gonna try to stay a neutral astrologer in this, but that's kind of what's going on. In the US or around the world, the Me Too movement, yeah, that right there, that was the start of these Pluto-Saturn aspects, coming together. And that was, when I saw that, I was like, fuck yeah, this is a manifestation of the rot is starting to be exposed. Being from the US, I'm very, I've always been connected to the karmic dance of the country of my birth. And we haven't finished the American Civil War. It wasn't finished on good terms. It wasn't rectified, in so many different ways. And the stain of genocide, land stealing, slavery, the treatment of women, the treatment of the poor, these things have not been dealt with or seen with a clear eyes, at least. And so now the mirror is getting held up and people get to look in it. And just like, Pluto, we can think of Scorpio. Well, this is a sign with an unflinching, icy gaze that wants to really look through all the bullshit and just say things as they are. Do we have the courage and the humility? That's also humility. Like, I've fucked up. That's a hard thing for most people to say, but that's what these times are asking. Not necessarily everybody's fucked up, but at least there's asking to say, these are the brass tacks. This is what's going on. There is a pile of hurt. I don't want to go on too long. I don't know the rhythm here, but when I come back into the United States, like I was living in Japan for a while, I've always felt the tension in the US. Whenever I would drive across the bridge from Detroit to Windsor, Canada, I'm in the bloody middle of the river and I feel like a lightning right away, right on schedule. I'm like, what the hell? You know, it's immediate when I go from Seattle to Vancouver and I cross that border, that friendship border at Blaine. I'm like, oh my God, God bless Canada. Geez, I know they've done some bad shit, but they haven't done quite as bad shit as my country has done, and you can feel it. There's and I don't mean to be U.S. centric because I know this is an international crowd, but this is a big year for the U.S. because we're coming into it. The U.S.'s Pluto return. So these aspects of looking at the rod of power around the world that have birthed these international movements, they are quadruply affecting the United States, because this is a time of reckoning. The ghost of Frederick Douglass is out. The ghost of John Brown is on the warpath. William Tecumseh Sherman is looking to burn some plantations. You know, this is, you know, this I'd be fire and brimstone, but this is what's going on. And you know, this is the train that's coming through. And so getting a little histrionic here, but that's you know, it's a reckoning, and just as the growth of Scorpio has to come through a baptism by fire, through a phoenix-like transformation. We have to go through a death, you know, and the death is truly actually seeing things clearly. Just like in my NDE, the most beautiful thing was the life review, because everything was looked at, and at every little movement. You know, people, that scares the death out of people. Like, oh my God, because I'm so terrible. Well, yeah, you are so terrible. You know, embrace it. You know, and then once you embrace it, you get over it. And because death is going to squeeze you and squish you like a toad. But once you're squished like a toad, then you're free. And that's what we're trying to do while we're alive. We're trying to allow ourselves to be squished like a toad, squished like a bug. Stop trying to be a good person hiding all these skeletons in the closet. Just get crushed, you know. So that's what's happening astrologically in a poetic kind of way.
in an Ishtar Howell poetic kind of way.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. I didn't mean to go on forever.
Beautiful, beautiful. I just love that image, Ishtar, that we're going through a global life review, where and anyone that's listened to any NDEs and spoken to people that have gone through life reviews, life reviews are so rawly honest, where you cannot hide under a rock. Any little vibrational distortion is exposed. And that's what we're going through globally, right?
So, and the more we can be open to that, the easier it is. You know, because that's the thing. It's like if you're the same vibration as lightning, it's not going to split you in two. It's going to pass through you. If you're to the degree that you're putting resistance against this force, this tidal wave, it's going to hurt some. And it's trying to train us to be that to be that vulnerable, to be that fluid, to be that honest, to be that willing to just, you know, just. One of the aspects of, say, Scorpio, because, you know, even though these planets are in Capricorn right now, Pluto is such a scorpionic sort of thing. I mean, it's the power of the confessional, because that's the thing that Scorpio is so most afraid to do, is to share its underbelly, is to open up and trust. And, you know, Scorpio is kind of like Cancer with a knife, you know. But that's, we're all kind of asking to sort of collectively go through the lessons of Scorpio, you know, and the lesson of Scorpio is to just be overt, ultimately, to stop having to be so covert and hiding under that shell, and just realize that you're already dead. You're already dead, and you don't need to protect yourself. Death is coming for you, unless you're Babaji. But even Babaji had to accept that he was already dead in a certain way. He had to give up the fight. You know, because, you know, Waterloo is here. You know, thinking of the ABBA song, you know, I tried to hold you back, but you were stronger. You know, that we're trying to hold back the self, and it is infinitely stronger, the big S self. And so let's just, you know, like, we just got to give up and let that move through our soul, because it is Waterloo for us. It is Waterloo. We've lost. We have to lose to win. You know, and so that's this aspect. That's the tower. Actually, that Pluto Saturn is often like the tower in the tarot deck. If you're into the tarot, we kind of have the tower and death happening at the same time, and you know, these are really all about transformation at the deepest level.
Yeah. So we're going through this global life review, but we're going through a personal life review too, as many people have said in the chat here. You know, the life review ain't easy. It ain't pretty. When you see, look, you know, one of the most potent life reviews I went through was doing a personal growth course, which my daughter has done recently, which holds the mirror up to your shit, to your control dramas, right? To your control dramas. And I think that, just like you said to Vladdy about, you know, the ego and the higher self, or the inner being, we can call the higher self the divine presence, the inner being, the higher self, the oversoul, so many names for it, but is to love all of it, including your BS. Just to love all of it. Love the ego. Don't try and overcome or transcend the ego. Just love that you've got the ego. But when you're in ego, recognize it. You know, the ego is the part of you that feels separate. And so separate to what? Separate to the love that you are. So when you need to defend yourself, you're an ego, because there is a fear there that says, if I don't get my point of view across, if I don't defend this point of view, then I'm going to be seen as you know, then I'm just recognizing that that's your ego and having a good old laugh, like, oh, there I go again. Loving the ego. So the intense life review is not to judge your BS for the BS, but to see it and love it. Is that how you'd put it, Ishtar? Thank you so much.
I mean, exactly. And thank you. Yeah. Well, a lot of, you know, for years I only taught meditation classes in person. That was kind of what I was trying to do. Over the past maybe 2 years at this point, I sort of started out just experimenting and then doing it more in earnest. I also teach people meditation one-on-one or in small groups via Zoom, especially when the pandemic hit and everybody was kind of, you know, when we, you know, not gathering in big spaces anyhow. So that's something that I do, and I've got a couple websites, one of them for meditation, that one can sort of get in touch with me if one is drawn to that, doing that sort of thing. I kind of been organizing them a la carte, basically. If people are interested, the squeaky wheels send an email, and we kind of, you know, sort of just go from there. With the astrological readings, that is something that I was very resistant actually to doing, because I figured, oh my God, I'm already a weird enough character with this, you know, meditation teacher thing. We're going to really marginalize yourself now. But from my heart was kind of coming this, you know, the signal, like, you need to be doing psychic work. Okay, you start off as an astrologer. You need to be an astrologer. And my wife was also encouraging me, as she has the tendency to have a good nose for the sort of the way of the Holy Spirit, and so that's a different sort of work, you know. That's less direct, spiritually speaking, in my opinion. You know, it can be therapeutic to sort of know what your dharma is, and that's kind of how I approach astrological work. Is I basically view people as songs. I feel people as songs and stories, and almost like beautiful architectural structures, these beautiful, unique cosmic thumbprints. And so the chart basically is telling me, what's the story that's trying to come through here? What's the divine song that's trying to be sung? And so in a chart reading, basically, I'm listening to that song through the chart. I'm tuning into that, and then I'm doing my utmost to pay attention and be out of the way enough to sing the parts of the song back that in this particular moment are really trying to come forward. And so that's what the reading is all about. And indeed, I short sold it myself. I thought, you know, this is indirect, but I found it's been wonderful working with people over the past 5 years, because, you know, these tears of joy that I've witnessed on so many occasions, these wonderful weights that seem to fall off just because we've sort of sung the song back. And so that's what we do. And we also can sort of look at a little bit at transits. What's the current astrological weather? What are the current dilemmas that seem to be happening? And there can be sort of fairly specific, you know, things that come through, like, maybe, you know, ease off over here, or fucking put the pedal to the metal right here and just go with all your courage and all your heart, mind, body, and soul in this direction. And you know, things like that. And so that's the astrological reading, and it's fun to see people, listening to the clarion call of their own soul, and tuning in themselves, because sometimes I don't have to do much. We just light the pilot light, and then the rest sort of unfolds. So there's my plug, and the astrological readings. I have an astrological website, and you can either book directly through my automated scheduler, or send an email or whatever. And that's it.
Beautiful.
I'd like to see an endorsement for both of those things, because I have been a customer for both of those things. Last fall, Ishtar taught me ascension meditation, and a while before that, he gave me an astro reading. And I just want to say both of those things have changed my life. And everybody has to find what works for them, but it's really special. And thank you again, Ishtar.
Ishtar, what is your website for the astrology?
awakenedightastrology.com.
Right.
That's the astrology. Awakened with a D-E-D on the end of that. Light Astrology.
Bye. Thank you.
The
Now I
website.
want to talk for like
Bye,
an
everyone.
hour about the fairy elementals in Portugal.
Right.
I know. Now you bring it up
Anyway.
right at the end. Now I want to talk.
Sorry, Angela.
Ghosts of Romans and Carthaginians as well, walking around in their
I-
armor. It's an old place.
Thanks, you're
Thank you for
outside.
having me.
Bye. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ishtar.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Love you.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Love
you,
you
Ishtar.
all. Bye.
Love you, Car.